That's a very bad.
Good afternoon from the National Weather Service, Lake Charles. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones, rushing to put stuff together and messing up the camera. All right. I do want to provide an afternoon update on the latest on Francine, who is just now a couple of hours away from making landfall this afternoon and just about an hour or so away from hurricane force winds actually reaching the coast. I want to start off here just real quick by showing the latest radar. Here is Francine, fairly large eye ongoing. Let me go ahead and put this into motion here. And you can see the eye of Francine now approaching the coastline just to the east of Vermilion Bay, right around the Morgan City area, perhaps just ever so slightly to the east of Morgan City. You can see Morgan City right there. And the hurricane force winds in and around the eye wall is going to be moving ashore here within the next hour or so. If I stop this in the last scan there, you can see the rain bands around the eye. That is where the strongest overall winds are. That's where we're looking at winds between 75 and 100 miles per hour. And you can see it just roughly about 10, 15-ish miles off the coast at this point. So at this time, we're going to be looking at hurricane force winds beginning to get ready to move into parts of Morgan City. Parts of Homa just to the east are going to be likely experiencing very strong tropical storm force winds, if not hurricane force winds. And these hurricane force winds on the west side of the storm are going to extend to as far back as possibly the New Iberia area or fairly close to it. Franklin, you are likely going to be in these hurricane force winds as well as the eye passes over. The eye is going to pass over essentially right over Morgan City. Franklin's probably getting on the western edge of the eye. New Iberia, you're probably going to be in that western eye wall. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at here over the next hour or two with these very strong hurricane force winds moving into the area. I do have a few slides for you here that I want to go through just to give you an idea as to how things have developed through the early afternoon. We do still have Francine as a strong Category 1 hurricane. Maximum sustained winds are still near 90 miles per hour. It has picked up a little bit more forward motion. It is now moving to the northeast at about, I think, 14 miles per hour at last check. So it is continuing to slowly accelerate, and we expect that trend to continue as the storm moves ashore. So it will be moving in and out of the area fairly quickly as we go through the afternoon and early evening. Hurricane force winds of 75 to 100 miles per hour are expected to move ashore between about 3 and 4 p.m., so about an hour from now. The eye of Francine will also be making landfall shortly thereafter. Obviously, that makes sense, between about 3 and 5 p.m. So what are we supposed to do about it? Here are our precautionary statements with regards to Francine and the eye wall that's going to be moving ashore. First off, don't go outside if you can at all avoid it during the peak winds. Again, these are winds that you're going to struggle to stand up in, and there's likely to be debris flying around out there, whether it be loose garbage cans, anything people forgot to bring in, tree branches. There's going to be a lot of junk out there that could potentially hit you if you go outside. So I don't recommend going outside. Now, as the eye moves over, there's always the urge to go out and check out. You get that calm air where the winds kind of die off, kind of in that center of circulation in that eye. At that moment, if you want to step outside for a moment, it'll be an experience you'll remember, that's for certain. Go. I'm not going to say you can't do that, but just be aware that those winds are going to be picking back up likely as that eye passes. So don't stay outside too long if you end up doing that. Shelter in place. And if anybody asks, I didn't tell you to go outside in the eye of the storm. You certainly want to stay away from windows as this eye wall comes through, because again, with all that debris and stuff blowing around, there is the potential for broken windows and shattered glass. So try to stay away from windows. You kind of want to treat this almost like a tornado situation. You want to stay ideally in an interior room, but at least as far away from windows as you can, because we're looking at winds that are going to be comparable to those in a low end EF0 or EF1 tornado with those nearly 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So interior room, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bathroom, but if you can get into a room with no windows, that would be your ideal place to be as this eye wall and the strongest winds roll into the area. This is a look at the visible satellite of Francine early this afternoon. You can see the eye feature has actually become visible now on the visible satellite. You can see it's kind of obscured, but it is there. And this was taken roughly about 15 minutes ago, so it's actually a little bit closer now to the shore than it's being indicated. But still, we're looking at a feature, an eye feature, that is actually getting a little bit more well-defined on the visible satellite. Now, again, with the storm being making landfall here within the next couple of hours, there's really not any additional time for any significant intensification, so that is not expected to be a concern. Nonetheless, it is still a strong Category 1 hurricane that is certainly capable of doing a fair bit of damage. This is the 1 p.m. intermediate advisory from the National Hurricane Center. 16 miles per hour. I said 14 miles per hour earlier. The movement is to the northeast at 16 miles per hour now. So it is picking up speed and continuing to move along. So we're not expecting a stall with this system. And again, landfall expected to be between about 3 and 5 p.m. with those hurricane force winds moving onshore within the next hour or so. We do have a tornado watch now in effect. This was just issued about 20 or 30 minutes ago for St. Martin, St. Mary, and Iberia parishes and points further east across southeast Louisiana. This is for the potential for tornadoes, especially within some of those inner rain bands as the storm makes landfall. Tornadoes are often occur with hurricanes, and they are often very quickly moving because they're moving within the wind field. So you could have a tornado potentially moving at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and they tend to be very short-lived. Sometimes they only last a minute or two, and a lot of times they won't even show up on radar because of how quickly they're moving. So oftentimes tornadoes can hit without warning, essentially, in hurricanes, because we don't see them on radar, and if we don't see them, we can't issue a warning on them. So just be aware that tornadoes are also going to be a possibility in and around the eye wall there as the storm makes landfall. Another reason to stay away from windows and stay in your interior rooms if at all possible. The tropical storm warnings that were previously in effect for Calcasieu, Western Cameron, Allen, Avoyelles, and Evangeline have all been canceled now because we no longer anticipate any kind of significant gust to tropical storm force in these parishes anymore. So we do still have hurricane warnings in effect for Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, and St. Mary, as well as tropical storm warnings in effect for Jeff Davis, Acadia, St. Landry, and Lafayette parishes. So the hurricane force winds are still possible in those 4 parishes, and the tropical storm warnings are still in effect, or still possible in those 4 parishes as well. But the rest of the region, it is going to be breezy, but we're not expecting hazardous winds in the rest of central Louisiana, extreme southwestern Louisiana, or southeast Texas. This is still a look at the potential maximum wind gusts as we go through, say, the next 6 to 8 hours or so. So we'll still be looking at some breezy conditions, perhaps a couple of gusts in the low 40s. We have gotten quite a few reports already this afternoon of 50 to 60 mile per hour winds along coastal parts of St. Mary. So that is an indication that those winds are really picking up as the wall or the eye wall approaches. I'm just looking at a new position update from the National Hurricane Center that just came out a short time ago, about 5 minutes ago. Just making sure that everything is still roughly the same with it. Yeah, the winds are still the same, and the motion is still the same. So generally speaking, the highest winds are going to be occurring here probably anytime in the next 2 to 4 hours or thereabouts, and then the winds will gradually begin to diminish once again. We already looked at that. I'm going backwards. Go forward. We do still have a flood watch in effect for portions of the area. Again, we saw this morning. It looks a little bit weird just because of how it's oriented. Parts of Rapides and Avoyelles parishes saw quite a bit of rainfall last night. That's why they are still in the flood watch. And then the flood watch generally extends along and east of the center of circulation, where the heaviest rainfall is expected to be. So that flood watch goes until Thursday morning. So there will be the potential for flash flooding, of course, with a landfalling tropical system. Rainfall forecast still hasn't changed a whole lot. We're still looking at large swaths of 6 to 8 inches across parts of Iberia, St. Martin, St. Mary, and perhaps eastern Vermilion parishes. 3 to 4 inches over towards Lafayette Parish, eastern Acadia, and St. Landry. And then points west of there are not expected to see a whole lot in the way of rainfall. The vast majority of the activity will be along and east of that center of circulation. We do still have storm surge hazards in effect, although within the last hour or so, we have noticed that a lot of the tide stations are reporting water levels actually falling. Because of the how the coastline is oriented, the winds are now actually beginning to push offshore. So for some locations, if not a lot of locations, we have already seen our maximum storm surge with this system. Once it makes landfall, these winds are going to actually switch out more out of the north and then northwest, and that'll actually push most of the water back out offshore. So we are near or past the highest storm surge that we're going to see with this system at this time, which again, we're ranging between 5 to 10 feet in and around the Vermilion Bay area and east to Port Fourchon. That's the tornado risk. We already have the tornado watch in effect, or tornado, yeah. So we already discussed that. We are going to do another full briefing at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. At that point, we may do it a little bit earlier if it looks like Francine's eye is making landfall a little bit earlier, but we're going to try to do it right about the time that the eye is making landfall, which should be somewhere pretty close to about 4:30 this afternoon. So that's just a kind of a general update as to what's going on here this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and pull the radar back up again to take another look at that real quick. Again, we have the eye just offshore. The eye wall. Let me bring this back over here. I'm going to see if I can make this full screen and I can maybe point out a few features to you here. All right. So I realize this is a little bit more difficult to see on the screen behind me here, but I do want to point out a few things. So essentially the stop, go. Okay. So essentially the eye wall is going to be right in this area here. Let me find a color that's actually going to show up. So here's your eye wall. All of this. Back this way, this is eye wall 2. So that is where the strongest winds are going to be located. I don't know what I just drew there. Okay. Weird looking thing. But that is essentially where the strongest overall winds are going to be, and they are approaching the coastline, roughly right up in here, something like that. This is where your 75 to 100 mile an hour winds are. Now within the eye itself, the winds are actually much calmer. You see there's no rainfall or anything in there. Winds are nearly calm. We'll say 5 miles per hour right there. Out here, though, 100 miles per hour gusts, even though the sustained winds are near 90. So there's a stark contrast there. We're about 45 minutes or thereabouts from the eye wall beginning to make landfall here. And I've got a couple of people actually reporting even on here. I was glancing over the comment section here that the winds really are picking up down that way. And that makes sense because we are getting that eye wall getting pretty close here. I'm going to run and check here just to see if we do. If you have a question about what we're talking about, feel free to throw it in there. I'll be happy to answer it here over the next little while. I'm just running through here. St. Mary Emergency Preparedness is saying live link to Morgan City. I'm not sure if they posted a live link to Morgan City. There are quite a few storm chasers down that way broadcasting, so you can probably find a live broadcast of what's going on down there. I don't have one handy with me at the moment, but there are live down that way broadcasting actual conditions on the ground. Terry's asking, can we show the radius of tropical storm force winds I don't have a good image to show that, but essentially, I mean, they extend much further out than what's being indicated here. I was basically showing you the extent of the hurricane force winds there. You know, all of these bands here are going to be low-end tropical storm force winds. As we get closer to the coast, some of this is probably high-end tropical storm force winds. So your tropical storm force winds, I think the Hurricane Center at last check had them extending roughly about 100 miles-ish away from the center of circulation. So areas have been seeing tropical storm force winds since kind of mid to late morning this morning. And you're going to continue to see on the south side of this storm, if I can back out of this a little bit, there's actually not a whole lot in the way of rainfall. And this is mostly due to the fact that there's still some dry air being pulled into the storm from the west. So, you know, you see the back edge of the eye wall here, and then there's nothing. This actually reminds me a little bit of Delta in that respect. Delta came ashore and everything was kind of on the north side of the storm, and there really wasn't anything on the south side. So, yeah, there are some breezy winds on this side, but there's not a whole lot of rain on the back side of the storm. Just kind of keep that in mind, though, as the storm moves inland. Once the eye gets north of you, it is still going to be breezy, but there's not a whole lot of wind. I mean, not a whole lot of rain, I should say, on the south side of the storm there. Rebecca says, will New Iberia get the eye wall? Yeah, I think New Iberia is going to wind up in the western eye wall. I'm going to have to zoom in here some. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, so I'm going to make this full screen, so hopefully make it a little bit easier to see for you here. But you can see New Iberia there in the upper left-hand corner. I needed to zoom out just a little bit. And you can see how it compares to where the eye wall is right now. Now, the storm is moving to the northeast. So the eye itself may not make it over New Iberia, but I think that western side, that western eye wall, is likely to get very close to New Iberia. So you could very easily be looking at some 80 to 90 mile per hour wind gusts as that eye wall moves past the New Iberia area. Audrey says there's no electricity in Carlos. We were expecting some power outages, and certainly the closer you get to that eye wall, the more power outages you're going to see. Emily says, I saw Avoyle's tropical storm warning was canceled. What should we expect to get here? At this point, you're going to see, you're going to see some of these outer rain bands, and you're likely going to see maybe some gusts to 30, 35, possibly 40 miles an hour. That should be about the limit of the winds you see, but you can see you are going to be getting some of those outer rain bands, especially as the storm moves inland. Hannah asks, why is Lafayette not included in the tornado watch? Because the tornado watch is essentially right at where the eye is making landfall and points further east. That's where the vast majority of tornadoes occur. It's not impossible to get a tornado on the west side of the storm, but it's pretty rare. So the tornado watch is where the tornadoes are more likely, and that is along and east of that eye. So that's why Lafayette's not in that tornado watch right now. Hope says the rain and winds are picking up in Franklin. That would make sense compared to where the eye wall is. It's going to be coming ashore here shortly. Kimberly asks, will Opelousas get some gusty winds? I think, yeah. Not hurricane force by any means, but maybe some gusts to 40 miles an hour. Stephanie wants to know, has it hit land yet? Not yet, but it will be within the next couple of hours or so. I think between about, at this point, I'd say probably between about 3 and 4 p.m., we're going to see that eye come ashore. Terry asks, will there be any wind on the back end after it passes? It's going to be breezy, but like we were talking about earlier with the fact that there's not really a whole lot on the back side of that eye wall. Once you get past that, there's not going to be any rain to speak of, or not much. And once you get out of that southern eye wall, there's not going to be a whole lot of wind left with it either, at least not any dangerous levels of wind. Brock says, why do tropical systems seem to always hit the area in the evening or night in our area? Brock, it's 2:30 in the afternoon right now, and this storm's getting ready to make landfall. So this storm that we're talking about right now contradicts that statement. Jonathan asks, is Lake Charles in the clear? Largely, yes. We may see a few showers this afternoon, but we have no threat for damaging winds in Lake Charles. Sharon says, how far away can you be to see the eye wall by New Iberia? The kids would like to see from a good distance. Well, first off, you don't really see the eye wall. It's not something that's necessarily visible. You can't just go outside and it looks like a wall of clouds or anything like that. It's not built that way. You could potentially see the eye wall from inside the eye, but once the eye makes landfall, then your eye is going to begin to obscure. So it's unlikely that you're going to be able to see anything. I do not recommend being outside in the eye wall because all you're going to see is just very strong winds and driving rain from those winds. So seeing the eye wall it's not really a thing necessarily. Yeah, like Ashley says, it's not an actual wall. It's more a turn of phrase than anything else. Now, in an airplane at height over the water, it kind of looks like a wall. It kind of looks like a stadium almost. If you look up and see the seats of a stadium, there's actually a term for it called the stadium effect. But once a storm moves inland, that eye wall gets enshrouded by clouds and overcast, so you can't really see it anymore once it actually makes landfall. Chrissy says, so Karen Crow will just be breezy with rain. That's right. Dale says, very few make landfall in daytime. Just as many make landfall during the day as at night. There's no scientific credibility to a storm making landfall during the day versus during the night. It's just a matter of how fast the storm is moving and when. There's no statistical anomaly there where storms make landfall more often at night than during the day. Nancy asks, is New Iberia going to avoid the worst of it? No, New Iberia is going to be in the worst of it for the most part. That's what we're talking about. The eye wall will be passing through New Iberia here within the next hour or so. Lynn says, time of landfall and where? Time of landfall will be in about an hour or maybe a little bit less. And where? Right at Morgan City or perhaps just ever so slightly to the east of Morgan City. It's going to depend. This eye is so large. The Hurricane Center is going to have to determine a point at which it actually moves inland, and that's not a task I want to deal with, but it will be right near Morgan City. Eric says, do storms like this cool the Gulf waters any? This storm isn't particularly strong enough to do that. There is that possibility that storms can, it's called upwelling, where the storm basically makes the water really choppy and it pulls up cooler water from down deep. But at least right now, the warm waters are very, very deep. So even if there was that effect going on, it would just be pulling up more warm water. So no, not really. Natalie says, how is everyone's hurricane snacks doing so far? Now is hurricane snack time. Eat your snacks. Have your snacks. It is hurricane party time if you have snacks. How is it looking as far as wind for Lafayette? Asked Scott. We're going to be looking at, again, some strong tropical storm force gusts, maybe 40, possibly 50 miles an hour. That's about as strong as you're going to see in Lafayette. Other than that, you're just going to be looking at a fair bit of rainfall. Terry asks, is there any chance that Abbeville can get the eye wall with New Iberia getting it? I don't think the eye wall is going to extend that far west. Although now that I look at it, it does seem to be expanding a little bit. Your western eye wall is going to be right up in here. So no, I don't think the eye wall is going to extend as far west as Abbeville. You're going to get some of these kind of inner rain bands here. So you may get some tropical storm force wind gusts out of that. But the eye wall is not going to extend as far west as Abbeville. I've got several people asking about Southeast Louisiana, and I'm Amanda's asking about Macomb, Mississippi. I cannot give you specifics about that. Unfortunately, we don't cover that area. That area is serviced by the Weather Service office in Slidell, and so I can't speak about detailed information about that. I get yelled at when I do. I have before, so I'm not going to do it. Brady asks an interesting question that actually has some scientific basis to it. Could it not weaken at landfall with it going into swamps? And there is some scientific validity. There's been some studies done about hurricanes moving over swampy areas, marshy areas, and does that slow the weakening process? And in general, yes, it does. Now, this storm is relatively weak by hurricane standards to begin with, so it is going to dissipate pretty quickly once it makes landfall. But there have been indications or events before, other hurricanes, that have weakened slower because of a swampy land area or a marshy land area. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up with this for now. We are going to provide another update at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon, or perhaps a little bit earlier if it looks like the eye will be moving ashore shortly before that. So stay in the loop for that. Otherwise, if you are in the Iberia Parish, St. Mary Parish, St. Martin Parish area, again, you are going to be looking at the onset of those very strong hurricane force winds within the next 30 to 45 minutes. You do want to be sheltered at this moment, and you want to stay there at least until the eye gets there. And once those winds calm down, you can venture outside for a little while. But keep in mind that the southern eye wall will still have strong winds with it. So you don't want to be outside in that eye for very long. We are going to go ahead and wrap up here again. Next briefing, 4:30 p.m. this afternoon, perhaps a little earlier if the eye wall or if the eye makes landfall a little sooner than that. Everyone stay safe. We'll talk to you again soon.